Well, we reached the end of another bumper three-game match week in the EFL Championship, and after a little bit of history that we'll get to in midweek in a moment, we are back for match week 12 and a full weekend fixture list taking place from Friday to Sunday. Some huge matches, some big games at the top and bottom, and we're going to preview and predict all 12 of them. As always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same down in the comments below. If you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be out next Wednesday, looking ahead to another weekend of action, which, by the way, incidentally, is also FA Cup first round weekend, and we're going to be at multiple games, so keep your eyes peeled for that. For now, though, before we go and look ahead to this weekend's action, we've got to go back to midweek, and it's not just my club, Luton Town, that were frustrated on Wednesday night, because I have had the most frustrating match day again. 7 points overall for me. As you can see, I've predicted nearly all of the draws right in midweek, and the one thing I said in the last episode, which has come back to haunt me, I went for loads of 2-2s last Saturday. They ended up being 1-1, so I'll play safe with the Championship's favourite scoreline. And what happened? All the games I predicted 1-1 finished 2-2 or 0-0. So lost out on perfect scores, and despite getting the joint most correct outcomes in midweek, I end up outside the top 10 when it comes to the predictions table. So let's have a look at those of you that were smart enough to get the Championship's favourite scoreline in the right places. If we go back to our pen and paper notes for this one and have a look at the top performers this week, joint with me on 7 points is Mitchell. On 8, we've got Si and Ojo, both of you pipping us by 1. David on 9, the highest of the single-figure scorers. And in the top 6, starting with Akshay with 10 points. Mello and Chris, 2 of our regulars, with 11. Harvey on 12, the Championship's favourite scoreline delivering for you. And in second place, Sam on 14. And top of the table, regular player Brian with 15 points in match week 11. A cracking effort from you, a massive well done. But now we've got to put it right. Surely I can convert all these correct outcomes into a perfect score somewhere. We move on to match week 12, and I'm going to give you a quick spoiler from the off. I am gambling on a very low scoring match day. I've generally got the idea right the last couple, whether it be the draws galore in midweek, the tight games last weekend. This time I am going low scoring. Let's see what I've gone for. We start with Friday night, Portsmouth versus Sheffield Wednesday. A fairly big game near the bottom end of the table. Pompey bottom with 8 points, really struggling for goals again now. They had that start where they picked up a couple of goals on the road, but after that 2-1 win away at QPR, disappointment at Cardiff City. Almost a correct prediction for me. But again, just gave away goals in clusters. We said it against Stoke, obviously to a worse extent, but 2 goals in the first 15 minutes, and you can't give teams that head start in a championship. I think arguably the bigger concern is the fact that they were completely outplayed and outclassed. Cardiff could have had more and it wouldn't have flattered them. And while they've done well under interim management, definitely signs of concern for Pompey, who now, as well as not dominating games and adapting their style, and I'm not really creating many chances either. Very long night for them. For Sheffield Wednesday, frustrating 0-0 draw at home to Swansea. We said that one was going to be low scoring. It's just been a start to the season under Danny Rowe where it's not quite ignited yet, but there are promising signs. I mean, that game was conversely a really boring one with very few chances. Swansea maybe created the best of them, but only managed 1 shot on target between them despite that. A lack of ruthless edge. No real cutting edge just yet from Sheffield Wednesday, but there are many teams in the Championship in that position at the minute. And I'm sure Wednesday are going to have a very comfortable year. So I think based on that, Pompey's goal scoring record in recent weeks and Sheffield Wednesday, well, 3 of their last 4 they failed to score in. I feel like I need to go for a low scoring game here. Pompey have actually struggled for goals more at home this season, ironically. Sheffield Wednesday on the road, even when they were winning at the back end of last year, were picking up 1-0s and fairly low score lines. And with 2 clean sheets in their last 4, not many goals at the other end. You know what? I'm going to go for Wednesday to nick it, but I think this is going to be an ugly one. I'm going to go for 1-0 to Sheffield Wednesday in a very tight game at Fratton Park. Let's move on to Saturday, and the first of the 3 early kickoffs. It is Bristol City versus Leeds United. Very different midweeks for these two. Bristol City had an incredibly slow start, but fought back with Nahki Wells in the second half at Stoke. No surprise that the 2 most inconsistent teams in the Championship produced a rollercoaster game. I will say that Bristol City created bundles of chances, had nearly 30 shots in the end, despite not dominating possession and whatever else. Was a really good performance going forward, but again, you cannot give 2-goal head starts early on. If it hadn't been for that ropey first 15 minutes, would have been a very convincing and brilliant away performance. Yes, maybe lacking that cutting edge in front of goal still, but got to say, was generally impressed by the performance other than the first 15 defensively. So if they can avoid that poor start, they might be in good nick against the Leeds side, who are just finding form, aren't they? Albeit, after a brilliant start themselves against Watford, aided immensely by Daniel Backman's two howlers, they did kind of get into a little bit of trouble in the second half. Letting that early goal just lost the ascendancy for a little bit, but overall, they were the better side. They could have won it more comfortably. And I say it again, I know they're still third at the minute. I think Leeds are going to be favourites for the title by a mile. I've said it since the very start. So this game is a tricky one for me because Leeds are obviously going to offer greater opposition than Stoke did and greater cutting edge than Borough did for Bristol City. And I know Bristol City are unbeaten in their last 6, but 4 of those were draws. And they have generally had a friendlier run of fixtures. The Borough game aside, no one that finished in the top half last year. So I think this is going to be difficult for them. Leeds United on the break will be given chances by Bristol City, and I'll bank on them to take a couple. I think it'll be a fairly tight game. They've not been running away with games, Leeds. I'm going to go for them to nick this one at Ashton Gate by 2-1 on Saturday lunchtime. Let's move on to the second of the early kickoffs. It is Coventry City versus Luton Town, a repeat of the 22-23 Championship playoff final. We'll get to Luton in a minute, but Coventry stopped the rot, I guess, with a 1-1 draw away at QPR. Again, started very quickly with Haji Wright getting a goal. But again, it wasn't a great performance. Had a couple of good chances, but QPR had a bit more of the ascendancy. And considering how they've played in recent weeks, that'd probably be a concern for Coventry. Just not really got going yet. Neither of Luton Town. Both started poorly the year they got to the playoff final. Let's hope it's a good omen in this one because Luton, do you know what? I actually came out of Wednesday night really confident because it was the best Luton performance in a long time. Back to basics, back to what they do best. Of course, a goal for Adebayo, which after a long drought is really important. And backing up that Watford result with a great performance, I think was really important. Of course, we can all talk about the decisions that went for, against and whatever else. There's going to be plenty of debate about that. However, if Luton play like that most weeks, they'll be right up near the top come the end of the season. So I've got no concerns. For this game, though, Coventry and Luton are always tight matches away from home. So I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline and sit on the fence with a 1-1 draw. And the final early kickoff features Luton's rivals who they beat last weekend. It is Watford versus Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn got a creditable point at home to West Brom to make it 2 clean sheets in the week so far. They can make it 3, they'll be very happy, but going away from home, that might be a bit trickier. Again, sat behind the ball, didn't create a huge amount against West Brom, only a couple of shots on target. They did have one good chance, but it was an even game and a draw was a fair result. Would have liked to have seen no great chances go in though, so I'd have got a perfect score at 1-1. But Watford disappointed at Leeds the first half. Look, it was all Daniel Backman, let's be honest. If it hadn't been for 2 howlers, it would have been 0-0. And then in the second half, they actually played quite well. And it seemed like, whatever Cleverly said at half-time, they came out and fought for him. And they're still 9th in the league, 3 points off the playoffs. The talk about him being under pressure is a little bit premature for me. But it's not the first rodeo with Watford, is it? Let's not get involved with that. It was a better performance second half. The first half, it was down to goalkeeping errors. I wonder if Daniel Backman stays in the team because he got a little bit involved with some of the stuff he didn't need to against Luton. In that game, he's cost his team 3 points, certainly 1. So I wonder if Bond will come in at the weekend. We'll wait and find out. But for this game, I think it's going to be quite tight. Watford have been very good at home this season. They won against Sunderland and Borough, no mean feat in their last 2 home matches. And Blackburn on the road have not been great. So as much as I think they're going to try and sit behind the ball, I do think Watford will nick this one. They'll give up 1 on the counter, but they're going to win this game. I'm going for Watford by 2-1. On to the 3 p.m. kickoffs, and we start with one that will be in the home banker category, but we've had a few of these in recent weeks that have gone wrong. It is Burnley versus Queen's Park Rangers. Of course, Burnley in their last home game were frustrated by Preston, but have picked up 4 points out of 6 on the road this week. A good win at Sheffield Wednesday, backed up by a solid draw away from home at Hull City. Again, wasn't the greatest performance in the world, probably a fair result, but Zian Fleming showing that quality in the squad, getting himself a goal. And it just shows that Burnley have got goal-scoring threats from so many areas, which is going to be important this season. They keep that little run going. They're up in that mix at the top. They're doing okay. No complaints for them. For QPR, very much stopped the rot after 4 successive defeats, all against sides they'd maybe be targeting pre-season. They did get a point at home to Coventry, was a much better performance as well. But again, the question is, who's going to put the ball in the back of the net for them? Who's going to do it regularly? And I don't think we got an answer there yet. So still a lot to learn from QPR. They're still in trouble, of course, second bottom in the table. This becomes a very big game for them. Can they sneak a point? Can they keep it tight at the back? Well, no clean sheets in the last 6. Let on a fair few goals on the road. 2 at Derby, 2 at Blackburn. I can't bank on anything else here. Burnley only conceded 1 in the last 5. That was away at Hull in midweek. So I'm going to go for a comfortable home win. Might come back to bite me again as it did against Preston. But I'm going to go by 2-0 for Burnley. And we approach the midway mark with Derby County versus Hull City. Hull, of course, as we just mentioned, drew against Burnley in midweek. Again, a good goal for them on a stroke of half time. A decent performance. And after a slow start, they are picking up. So some credit to them there. They gave them a decent game. They're starting to look a bit more comfortable on the ball and defensively massively improved their structure from before the international break. But they've got to add in that bit of attacking threat, which against Sunderland and against Burnley to an extent wasn't there with regularity. For Derby, back-to-back 1-1 draws this week. Not the worst results in 2 away games. Now it's about what you do at home to finish the week. A 1-1 draw at Millwall followed up with a 1-1 draw at Oxford United, who so far had been brilliant at home. So to come from behind to get a result, to probably just edge the game in terms of chances, definitely no mean feat. But can they back that up at home now, where they've been very good so far this season? I'm going to sit on the fence a bit for this one because Hull have changed their style slightly on the road to make them a little bit more solid. Or certainly they had in their last 2 home games, sorry. It's whether or not they produce that shocker they did at Norwich or their newfound confidence maintains itself. If it does, I'm going to sit on the fence and say for the 3rd time this week, Derby will pull out a Championship's favourite scoreline. 1-1 is my prediction at Pride Park, and I'm pretty sure already that's going to be wrong. Let's move on to a big game at the bottom as a drifting Plymouth Argyle host Preston North End. Plymouth now sit just 1 place above the relegation zone, having lost back-to-back games this week. They were a bit more defensively solid than that 5-0 against Cardiff with a 1-0 defeat away at Millwall. They conceded the early goal. They haven't offered a lot going forward on the road this season. It's either been try and go aggressive and concede lots of goals or sit in and keep it fairly tight. Yes, Plymouth had a lot of the ball. We expect that against Millwall, but they still offered up chances. And in the end, Millwall could have had 2 or 3 in fairness, but it was a better away display. Couldn't get much worse. But Plymouth's key this season is going to be home form. We've seen it already. They're up against a Preston side who have picked up 4 points this week already. Now 4 unbeaten. And last time on the road got a creditable draw at Burnley. The question here is, are they going to be able to adapt to trying to play out a bit and be a bit more aggressive in a game that they might be expecting or targeting to pick up points? Because when they did that at Millwall, they were beaten pretty handsomely. A 2-2 draw at home to Norwich will have been, well, a little frustrating for them because, again, like the pattern of many games in midweek, 2 up in 15 minutes and then threw it away. Not often what we see from Preston. Interestingly, 4 of the 5 shots on target went in that match, but Preston giving up a lot of the ball. Norwich City were aggressive against them. And in the end, you could argue there were no real signs of Preston winning it after the equaliser went in. So, does make this an interesting game, and I'm not actually sure what to go for. I've been really impressed with Plymouth at home. The last 2 games in particular against Luton and Blackburn, they played excellently. So I am going to go for Plymouth to nick this one and then Preston's unbeaten run. Preston generally have done well against the bottom half sides over the last couple of years. I'm going to go for Plymouth. I've just got a bit of a hunch on this one. I'm going to go for 1-0 to Plymouth at home park. As we move on to another one that falls into the potential home banker territory that may let us down. It is Sheffield United versus Stoke City. Sheffield United, after the invincible start, the longest unbeaten run in a championship, then went for 2 straight defeats, albeit away at Leeds and Middlesbrough. A 1-0 defeat in midweek after being very comfortably beaten by Leeds last Friday. And again, to be honest, they were probably just about second best, but did have a couple of chances of their own against Borough. A late defeat will be a bit of a crushing one for them because they could have stopped the rot straight away with a draw there. Whereas for Stoke, their opponents this midweek, draws galore is the flavour of the month. It's now 4 unbeaten after that thrilling win against Pompey, 3 successive draws. But as we mentioned against Bristol City a bit earlier on in their section, not a great performance. By the first 15 minutes, where they obviously got the 2 goals, they were largely outplayed by Bristol City. They gave up nearly 30 shots on goal. And we saw a similar thing to the whole game in Palak's first game in charge, which we watched on stream here. It was a little bit weird. As soon as they conceded, they sort of fell apart. And again, it was a little bit of that of, well, when we lose it and we turn the tide and momentum's against us, what do we do then? And there wasn't really a reaction. So in the end, probably quite pleased to hang on for the draw from the position they were in. But away from home at Sheffield United, they cannot afford to do that because they're going to have moments of jeopardy and moments against them. And if Sheffield United get the first goal here, I think they win comfortably. So I'm going to go for Sheffield United by 2-0. If Stoke get the first goal, it could make things interesting. Into the final third, we move to Sunderland versus Oxford United. Another that on paper you might put in the home banker territory. For Sunderland, 2 brilliant away wins this week without really playing particularly well. Gritty performances at Hull and Luton, picking up 6 points where they didn't create bundles of chances. I've got to say I was really impressed with Romain Mundle in midweek. I think he's been fantastic this season so far. He's been a key attacking threat, and Chris Riggs scored a classy goal as well. Probably a compliment to Luton the way that Sunderland set up, and I think it would be fair to say they came for 1 point and took 3. But those individual moments of quality going forward really do show. And unlike a couple of years ago, and perhaps a sign of where this team's progressing under Regis Debris, they're able to cope better out of possession and dealing with barrages of set pieces, that physical side. Chris Mepham becoming a bit of a rock at the back for them. I've been really impressed with them overall, I've got to say. For Oxford United, it is 5 draws in succession after that positive start. And to be fair, their home form has been where all of the points have come this year, certainly in terms of victories. So anything they're going to get here, you probably wouldn't go beyond a draw, albeit away at Pompey and Luton, they did look decent in their last 2. So for Sunderland, who are in good form themselves, still top of the table on 25. The only risk really is either complacency or a long recovery period from a very tough physical game on Wednesday night. I think they'll be okay because Oxford haven't shown as much on the road this year. And Sunderland are going to be quick on the break. They're going to create chances. So I'm going to go for it to be a fairly tight game. And Oxford, as we've seen, generally do score. I'm going to go for Sunderland by 2-1 to maintain their spot at the top of the table. As we move into the final 3, starting in South Wales for Swansea City versus Millwall, I would get your money on this being a low-scoring game. Please gamble responsibly. Swansea have now not scored in 4 matches. They have only produced 8 in 11 so far. Their goals for and against columns are starting to look a bit like Preston a couple of years ago, if you know what I mean. Millwall, back to their usual ways. 1-0s, 1-alls, 0-0s and 1-0s. A 1-0 win at home to Plymouth. A good performance, gave up the ball, but did what Millwall do and managed to get the victory and clean sheet. They're quietly plodding along in mid-table, doing okay, but that thrilling start to the season with those exciting couple of games has really dried up since then. There's no doubt in that. If you put more than 1 goal in this game, you are an incredibly brave person. The question is, which way do you put it? Swansea have been okay at home. They've not really conceded many goals. Millwall have been so hard to call. But away from home, they had that disappointment at Cardiff. They sat in against West Brom. I'm not going to go for Millwall to score. This could very easily be 0-0, and I know a lot of you will go for it. But I'll stick my neck on the line. I'll be brave. We can't have a match day of all draws again. I'm going to go for 1-0 to Swansea, and we'll see if they can end their winless run of 5. The penultimate game and the last one on Saturday is West Bromwich Albion versus Cardiff City. West Brom, another side involved in a draw in midweek. They went to Blackburn and drew 0-0. Makes it 3 draws in a row and 5 without a victory now for the Baggies, as the goals from pre-season and the early games with Josh Madgett have dried up. Only 1 goal scored in their last 4. That was at Oxford last weekend. And Cardiff, on the flip side of that, released from the shackles, it seems, of Errol Balut. 4 games now in which they're unbeaten, and in that period they've scored 9 goals, including 7 in their last 2. Crucial games against sides in and around them at the bottom, Pompey and Plymouth, and they've beaten them by an aggregate of 7-0. They were fantastic in both. They were dominant in both. They've started to look pretty decent, and maybe just signs that they're going to creep up the table. However, they're going away to a top half side now, a team that will be in that playoff mix, and a team that are incredibly miserly at the back. In that run of draws and defeats in the last 4, they've still only conceded 2 goals, West Brom. They are a very good team defensively. And Cardiff, to be fair, while they've been picking up results, they've not played any of the top sides since Leeds, where they were handsomely beaten at home. So I am going to go for West Brom to win it. I am going to go for them to expose Cardiff's defence. And I'm going to go for them to win by 2-0 at the Hawthorns. They just need to get someone scoring again and they'll be all right. But West Brom still plodding along nicely. They just need to find a way to create a couple more chances. And for Cardiff, well done to the interim manager. A brilliant spell he's having. The final game on Sunday is a pretty big one in that battle for the top 6 because it is 7th v 8th. The two sides on 17 points, and that is Norwich City versus Middlesbrough. Two sides that have had an okay week. Middlesbrough were obviously sucker punched by Bristol City despite dominating the game, not for the first time this season. But he did finally nick a win against Sheffield United. 1-0, and Latilaf getting a goal could be crucial for them. If they can get him firing, they might well be firing their way into the playoffs. For Norwich, the unbeaten run continues, having come back from 2-0 down against Preston, and of course improved, but can't start these games slowly, and conceding the first couple of goals, giving a 2-goal head start. It's cost a few teams this midweek, hasn't it? But a really good unbeaten run for them now. After a slow start, it must be said. Some thumping victories at home, as we saw against Hull and Watford. On the road, they've managed to pick up draws, which is better than they did a lot of last year when they snuck 6th place. So if they can find their best performance on Sunday, you'd have to fancy them at home. But the question is, as it always is, will Borough take their chances? I'm going to say no. I'm going to go for Norwich City to win it. They've been brilliant at home. They've been good to watch there too. I'm going to go for them to nick this one at Carrow Road by 2-1 on Sunday. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for in Matchweek 12. From the history of midweek, with over half of the match day being draws, 7 games out of the 12. This time, I have only gone for 2, haven't I? Both the Championship's favourite scoreline, Derby Hull and Coventry Luton. I've also gone for no team to score more than 2. I've also gone for 6 teams not to score, and Pompey being the only home side from that on Friday night. We'll see how good or bad these predictions look. You can let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. And as always, get involved, give us your scores for the match day. And if you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out in Wednesday's recap when we look ahead to match week 13. Unlucky for some, hopefully not for me. If you enjoyed this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Good luck to your sides at the weekend. I hope you have a good one wherever you're going. And as I mentioned before, next weekend, in addition to the Championship predictions, we're going to be at loads of FA Cup action. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Go and let us know if you're going to a game as well next week, if you've got a local side in the first round. If you want to stay up to date with everything and make sure you don't miss it, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Thank you so much for watching as always. Your support, massively appreciated. We'll see you back here next week as we look ahead to another big weekend in the EFL Championship.